welcome everybody to another episode of the Commanders Film Room. You guys can find us on YouTube at the Big Doug and Carmi Show. We are here every single Wednesday at 4 p.m. to break down the All 22 with our film analysts Mark Bullock and Nick Ackridge. Gentlemen, good to see you guys today. Hope all is well. We're calling this episode Lamenting the Loss in Lambeau. We had a 27-18 loss against the Packers last Thursday. A pretty disappointing loss potentially, depending on how you look at it. Mark, let's start off with you. Obviously, the Washington had higher expectations going into the game. The offense seemed to struggle a tiny bit, but just curious, if you had one takeaway from the game, what would you say it would be?
It's early in the year and there's a long way to go. A lot of people have been, I think, especially because it's such a long week with it being the Thursday night game. I think a lot of people have had a lot of time to kind of dwell on this loss and be like, they're terrible, and they're diving deep into, Jaden Daniels has been figured out and Cliff Kinger has been figured out and all of this. And I think the big takeaway for me is they ran into a very, very good Packers team on a short week. That Packers team was already very good, and it was supercharged by Micah Parsons. And Washington came out flat, and we'll get into why on both sides of the ball. But I think there's reasons to believe that, given what Dan Quinn and Adam Peters have put together, that they would come out better a second time around if they played them later in the year. Not necessarily win. I don't want Packers fans coming after me being like, we'll beat you in the playoff. You might well beat them in the playoff. Packers are very good.
Yes.
But if they face the Packers again, I would expect them to do a lot better than they did this time.
There were definitely a lot of conspiracy theories coming out of this game, whether the Washington fell in a step or a sophomore slump, or if Jaden lost it or can't beat zone or whatever it is. We're going to break down the film today. I do agree with you. I do think the Green Bay Packers are a very strong team. They had the number 6 ranked defense last year coming into the season before they added Micah Parsons, so they definitely added another component to it. And honestly, they look like a great team. They look prepared. They shut down the Lions week 1. They had a tough defense against us in week 2. And as you mentioned, it's a long season. We have 15 more weeks to go, and we definitely can improve and learn from what this loss. So it's not the end of the world. That being said, we do have a game coming up in a couple of days, and we had some major injuries walked away from week 2. One of the big ones, the headliner, is Jaden Daniels potentially spraining his knee and not being 100%. So, Nick, I'm going to throw this over to you. Obviously we had some injuries with Eckler and Wise. Jaden Daniels with his knee banged up. What are your thoughts on him playing this week in regard to, would you preserve him? Would you roll him out if he's feeling good? Would you give him autonomy? What are your thoughts in regard to rolling out him or Marcus Mariota against the Raiders?
Yeah, I think it obviously all comes down to whether or not he's 100%. If he's 100%, then go for it. But you just don't know sometimes with players whether or not they're really going to say that they're 100% or not. And sometimes you do have to protect them from themselves. It's been tough for me. I think that if you play it safe, you have a reliable, capable backup of Mariota. We've seen that he can come in and win some games for you. But man, I just want to watch Jaden play. That's all I want. That's all I really want. So it's tough for me to be like, sit him. But if he's truly not 100%, you don't want to make that injury worse. But kind of also comes down to, is resting 1 week really going to heal the injury? And sometimes these are types of injuries that you might have to just kind of deal with and play through. So I'm not a doctor. I'm not in that room. I don't really know what's going on. So personally, selfishly, I would like to see him play. But I don't think either way that you're going to, suffer a severe kind of setback if Mariota comes in.
There's definitely entertainment value to the watching football every single week, right? Jaden Daniels is a superstar for a reason. He provides that star power that we do want to watch every week. But there's that consideration about whether a long-term preservation for him. Marcus Mariota has proven to be a pretty solid backup, but he hasn't practiced all offseason as well. He had Achilles tendonitis. That's something to consider as well. That being said, I know we are masochists, guys. We're going to watch some pretty dirty film right now from the game and to break it down. We're going to do this every week through all the highs and lows, and we're going to throw it over to Nick in a moment. We're going to reflect on the defense. And what was surprising is that Tucker Kraft walked away with a career game against Washington. Maybe we'll break down the film on why. So give me 1 second to get everything set up, and we'll get ready to go. All right. Mike's yours, Nick.
Yeah. So obviously this is not the Packers game here. But, kind of going in on a short week, what you're kind of looking at in terms of the Packers offense and how can you beat, the Commanders defense, and kind of going into that, you kind of look at some tendencies, and the Commanders are going to play a lot of single high coverages. They just are top 3 percentage. So kind of going off of last week's sort of thing, you look for some tendencies, and we can kind of see here quickly with this motion from Malik Neighbors. You can see that I believe that's Trey Amos. Trey Amos follows him all the way across the field. They don't switch anything. Sometimes you'll see with defenses that, these two guys, Sanderson and Lattimore, will push out, and then Amos will take the inside guy, but you don't see that. There's no switching here. So this is just something that they can kind of pick up on, something to possibly look at and take advantage of. Later in the game, similar sort of look here where you get Neighbors coming on a motion. They're going to rotate down to single high this time and play man coverage. But again, you see a safety coming down, and they're still not going to switch these routes with Neighbors going outside, the outside wide receiver coming inside. Sometimes you'll switch that, sometimes you don't. So it's another tendency they're looking at, and then Neighbors runs a ridiculous route against Quan Martin, who doesn't really have a chance there. So that's just something that you can kind of look for tendency-wise, and it's something to look at possibly beating. So this is the first third down of the game for the Packers. Again, tendency is Commanders are going to play a lot of single high. So even though they're showing too high here, you get kind of these motion looks, and okay, Jordan Love at this point knows that it's man coverage. It's likely man coverage with Lattimore following him across. And that's kind of another thing the Commanders do on these third down and fourth down shorts. They just kind of elevate their man coverage. They play it again, top 3 in the league on third and fourth down. So kind of take that. You saw that previous week of they're not going to switch this route. So you get a nice, easy outbreaking route for a really simple, easy completion. Lattimore's got absolutely no chance on this play because they're not switching it. Again, sometimes you'll see defenses, and it works both ways. Sometimes switching works for you, and sometimes switching causes problems because you'll have guys not on the same page. It takes a lot of communication to switch these routes properly. So just kind of something that they really kind of took advantage of, and they did it really throughout the game where they're going to use a lot of these man beater plays, and this was the biggest one, just kind of right off the gate, right at the start of the game, just kind of using that sort of tell that they saw from week 1, and you take advantage of it. You've run an outbreaking route against someone who's motioning from the inside like that. It's just Lattimore doesn't really have a chance, and that was kind of what they did all night, basically.
Well, let me pose a question to you guys real quick. I'm sorry to interrupt you. So obviously, Marshall Lattimore, he did express that in the post-game interview about a lot of man beater rings set against him, and obviously NFL teams are looking at tendencies here. I guess, do you think, so a couple questions. Is our defense suited for man coverage? Do you think that's Marshall Lattimore's strength and Trey Amos's strength? And Marshall Lattimore got kind of beat up, apparently, in the public in regard to his coverage skills. Was it his fault, or do you think it was more of it's a lack of adjustment by the defense?
It's a little bit of both. They did adjust later on. There was another one where, he kind of, I didn't include it in here, but I did include it with a kind of thread that I put together of they did start to switch some routes later on in the game. And that kind of suited them a little bit better. But there was another play where, again, they didn't, and it's you man coverage third and short again, and you have to know that these kind of man beaters are coming, and he takes a step back the wrong way, starts to bail, pretending like it's cover 3, and he gets himself out of position. So it's a bit of both. There's, again, this type of play he's got no chance on. He just doesn't have a chance to make any sort of play on the ball here. But there's other times where he is kind of in the wrong a little bit, but that's what you kind of have to live with when you play a lot of man coverage. They did it a lot last year. This isn't a new thing for them. If you just aren't getting pressure home quick enough, then this is what's going to happen. And even when they did get pressure home, Jordan Love still tore him up. I think he was the highest graded quarterback against pressure this past week. So it was just kind of tough for him.
Thank you.
That's all I got for man coverage. I mean, I could have put in 10 more clips of that exact same sort of thing, but it's just kind of a look at how on a short week you can kind of quickly beat some of that stuff.
Gotcha. So we'll transition over to Mark's film in a second, but for the most part, in regard to the Packers, their scheme was they saw some tendencies, they decided to do some man beaters, and they got ahead of it over there. So throw it over to Mark.
Yeah, so the other part of what they did offensively was is it Tucker Kraft? I keep saying it right. Yeah, Tucker Kraft. I keep saying Tyler Kraft, I think, for some reason. But Tucker Kraft had a huge game, and he had it on basically 2 concepts, which is very frustrating. But it kind of plays into a little bit more of some of it was a lot of people were asking, is it like a coaching issue? Was it really badly game planned, or was it like players were doing terribly? And for me, the Kraft issue specifically was more of an individual error sort of thing than Joe Witt having a bad game plan. And now you might say, if they're getting beat on the same concept over and over, then it's a coaching issue. But I will hopefully demonstrate here why it's not necessarily a coaching issue. So this is the first one, and we'll see 3 plays here that are all fairly similar, the same kind of idea. The first 2 are the exact same, the third one's slightly different. We got a play action pass. So Packers are running like a little fake inside zone run. Jordan Love's going to roll out to his left, and they're going to bootleg out. You've got Kraft in here, and he's going to engage in a block on Javonte Jean-Baptiste on the end, and then he's going to release out into the flat as the flat option. You've got a receiver here that's going to motion in short, and he's going to act like he's doing this kind of wide receiver insert run that you see a lot of zone teams do. And then he's actually going to release out into a deeper corner route, and the running back's going to step up and block instead. So that's the core of the concepts that we're getting here. We're getting basically a corner flat off of play action and a bootleg. And what you'll see here is when this receiver goes in motion, Will Harris, who had a really, really good game against the Giants, really struggled in this one. And he's going to come rushing down into the box as part of the run fit, because that's his job once the receiver comes into the blocking front. So he's going to rush down and try to fill his role as a run support, but he's just going to get fooled by the play action. So we'll run this through here. And you'll see he comes down, he's right up on the line of scrimmage in the run support, the ball is snapped, and the receiver takes a little step in towards him, and he's thinking, I've got to fill this run, and then the receiver slips him and gets down the field. Lattimore has to peel off to try to get him, and now you've got an issue of where Harris was likely responsible for Kraft in man-to-man coverage, because Lattimore's taking the receiver, Harris is the strong safety, he's probably the one that's responsible for the tight end. I very much doubt they're hoping for a defensive end to cover a tight end in man-to-man coverage. So Harris is the guy responsible for him here. But because he thought it was a run, he's working into the backfield, and now he's got to this point where he's never going to get back to this. So I might as well try and blitz and get.
You got to commit at that point.
Exactly. So he tries to get to the quarterback. The issue is that Javonte Jean-Baptiste lets Kraft go as well, and so that leaves Kraft wide open in the flat, and neither of them are getting to the quarterback in time. And that leaves Kraft obviously tons of space to turn up the sideline, and he picks up something 15 yards ish on that play. And it was a case of, you can see it here again. Will Harris comes charging down into the box, which he's meant to do. That's correct. But then he bites really heavy on this run fake, and kind of forgets that actually I'm probably meant to be covering Kraft in the flat here. And then both of these guys end up trying to get to the quarterback. Neither of them are able to get close to him. And Kraft catches that pass with nobody around him. That's a free 15 yards for the Packers.
Absolutely.
So that was.
Is he supposed to break off he's supposed to come up to the line, maybe potentially read the play, and then break off into Tucker Kraft? That's what he's supposed to do, but he overcommitted.
Essentially that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is a tough responsibility for him, because he, as the safety, he has both run and pass responsibilities. So he has to be able to fit that run. If that was handed off, that's what he was meant to be doing, was taking on that that wide receiver insert and filling his gap. But then he has to read pass quick enough to peel off and take the tight end at the same time. So it's a tough little exchange that they do. It's why they bring these receivers into the blocking surface and then run play actions out of them, because it makes it really tough on the safeties. But this was a little bit later on in the game, and it's the exact same play, just flipped the other way. So again, you have the receiver going in motion, being this little fake block, and then working out as the corner route. You got Kraft blocking the edge and then working to the flat. And again, you got Will Harris coming down into the box here, and he gets fooled by it again. So he doesn't get as fooled by it this time, but he still gets fooled by it. So you'll see that he takes a little moment here where he's reading the receiver coming at him, and it's potentially a run. And then he kind of pauses. He's like, okay, the receiver is not actually trying to block me. At this point, he should be like, okay, it's a pass. Let's get out here. But he just pauses an extra second. And that's when he gets his eyes in the right spot, realizes he's meant to be covering Kraft. And then credit to him, he does get outside and get in position to make a play where this is only going to be a 1 or 2 yard gain if he makes this tackle. But he makes a second mistake and he misses the tackle, and then it turns into a 17-ish yard gain, something like that. So that's 30 yards on 2 plays. And again, you can see it here. He's worried about this receiver trying to block him. And at this point, when that receiver is not running straight at him, he should know that should be a pretty obvious key to him that actually it's a play action pass. Plus, he has already seen this exact play. So that should also be a pretty big indicator to him. But he kind of has that little delay. He's like, which one am I going for? Oh, no, it's actually a play action pass. And that's all it needs for Kraft to get out to the flat. And as I say, he does well to make up ground, but then he goes in really high. Not great form tackling and is easy to shake off, and Kraft gets up the field for another big gain. So that's, I think that was 32 yards on the same play. So 2 plays for 32 yards, and those are 2 big gains, big first downs, getting drives going. This was not quite the same play, but a similar idea. It's another play action pass, and this time Kraft is a little bit further inside with an extra tight end outside of him. This time, you could legitimately say this might have been Frankie Louvu's fault. But it's the same idea. It's a play action pass. He engages in a block and then he releases out late. And we'll see it from the end zone angle. And you see there's Will Harris is outside here as the strong safety. He's got to play the edge, but he's also probably, I think, responsible for this tight end. Whereas Frankie Louvu is inside on what's his name, Tucker Kraft, and he's got to take him on. And then I think Louvu's probably meant to peel off, but you can see at this point, Will Harris kind of is like, oh no, this is a play action pass. This might not necessarily be my guy, but I've got to try to get back to stop it. And he can't get back to stop it. And Kraft gets another touchdown on a very similar idea. So that was one way where it's kind of 3 little play action passes. 2 of them were the exact same play. One of them was a very similar idea, and Kraft got through, uncovered on all of them, and picked up, was it 3 passes, 38 yards and a touchdown, something like that, 40 yards and a touchdown on those 3. Now we're about to see 2 more plays that are the exact same play, and they're a different play from the one we just saw, but these next 2 plays are the same play.
This play's pretty cool.
It is a very cool play. Washington ran it pretty much the same thing themselves.
Ravens run it a lot too. Basically, you get big bodies on the field. You got 3 tight ends there. So as a defense, your response is going to be big bodies on the field, and I believe that's Wagner, Louvu, and
this is Jordan McGee. This is Bobby Wagner. They've even got Percy Butler outside here playing as basically a corner, but a big safety corner. And so and Louvu's on the edge of the line of scrimmage here. So they've got 3 linebackers, they've got 3 safeties on the field, and the only corner is Marshawn Lattimore here. It's essentially it's just a 4 verticals concept, but the way they get to it is slightly different. Normally you'd have receivers split outside, and if you had 3-by-1, you'd have the inside guy run the deep over, you'd have this guy run at the seam and a guy running down the sideline. Whereas here, they bring this receiver across in motion, and he's going to run the vertical route on the outside, which is going to be matched by Percy Butler. Then you're going to have these 2 tight ends running a switch release where the outside tight end runs the deep over, and then
the switch release is just an unnecessary mean thing to do to a defense. You don't need to switch release them, but it just causes a little bit more confusion.
Yeah. So he's going to switch release and get into the seam, and then they're going to make it a little bit additionally annoying where they have the running back releasing out to the flat. So you've got 4 receivers on one side of the field that you have to kind of have a response for defensively. Now, I actually think the Commanders, for the most part, do a pretty nice job on this play. I know who I think is at fault, but the guy that I think is at fault seemed to think like 3 or 4 other players might have been at fault. So we'll see.
You tell me who you think is at fault, and I'll tell you who we thought was at fault here.
Right. Okay. So we'll play this through. You'll see the guy go in motion, and it breaks off into the 4 verticals. Now, at this point, this play looks like they're picking it up fairly well, right? You've got McGee fanning out to the flat to cover the running back. You've got Percy Butler, who's picked up the receiver going in motion. You've got Will Harris and Quan Martin are going to bracket that deep over route. And that leaves Bobby Wagner carrying Tucker Kraft up the seam. To me, that all looks like it's been picked up properly, and that those are the correct responsibilities picked up. However, Wagner is going to end up just running straight out here like he's meant to be covering the flat, and nobody's going to cover Kraft up the seam. And so we'll see that here. And then Wagner gets turned around and is putting his hands up like, hey, who's meant to be covering him? And I think it's meant to be you, Bobby, but I don't want to question Bobby Wagner. He's probably the one guy on this defense that knows every scheme like the back of his hand better than anyone else. So if he thinks someone else is in the wrong, there's every chance that someone else is. But to me, this is him. And because everyone else seemed like they had picked up their correct responsibilities. Now, in an ideal world, yes, you'd have Bobby Wagner covering the running back in the flat, and Jordan McGee, who's a lot more athletic, would be trying to run up the seam with Tucker Kraft. But you don't get an ideal world in the NFL very often, and the way the routes had played out and had distributed, Wagner, in my opinion, should be covering Kraft up the seam. He gets lost or thinks he's meant to be doing something else, and that leaves Kraft wide open, and then he carries on running, and it turns into a 57-yard gain. So that was not great. Obviously, Nick, did you want to jump in with who you guys graded it as, or who you guys?
So we have the great thing about our system is we have a lot of ways to look at how many times they've run similar coverages against similar looks and against 3 tight end looks and stuff like that. So I was not in on the conversation, but I know there was a large conversation about who was at fault here, and we put this on Jordan McGee, saying that he needed to carry the seam up the or carry the seam basically. Again, that could be wrong. Just like you said, we don't 100% know. We also dinged Quan Martin a little bit here because we would prefer Quan Martin to stay over the top of the middle of the field route and kind of let the other third defender, I think that's Lattimore on the play, kind of take that.
Yeah.
Have the hook curl or the hole here. I think it's just going to be a hole defender.
It's Will Harris here.
So Will Harris take that, and he should stay over the top of Tucker Kraft. But again, it's such a great concept, and it throws a lot of things at you because, typically from what we've seen is that their outside curl defender when they rush 5 is going to carry the seam. That's what we've seen from last year's film and this week's film. And then you have Bobby Wagner take that flat, and then Will Harris take that deep over. Lattimore sits and takes the release route from the other one, and Quan Martin plays over the top. It's just such a tough concept to defend.
It's a very tough concept to defend, and that would be the other way I could see it playing out. Is, as I mentioned, the ideal world, you get your more athletic guy McGee covering the tight end up the seam, and Wagner takes the flat. But given their positioning on the field, where Wagner was more inside and McGee was more outside, you expect the outside guy to try to get over the flat rather than have Bobby Wagner trying to get from the middle of the field out to the flat.
Yeah, and I think the switch release is what really kind of messes him up even more because he sees that outside tight end go inside, so he thinks he's fine. Yeah, I got to go look through the rest of their cover 3 reps, but they do a lot of this. This isn't really fire zone, but rush 5, cover 3 here, and it's just, again, if you're not getting home with that 5, it's going to be tough. And this is designed to be a cover 3 beater, and shocker, it beat cover 3.
And then in the second half, they came right back to it. The only slight difference is that they're doing it out of 12 personnel. So there's 2 tight ends rather than, actually, no, it's 11. There's 3 receivers and 1 tight end rather than 3 tight ends and 1 receiver. But it's the exact same concept. It's just run from a different personnel group. And you get the same thing where you have the receiver on the far side running in motion. He's going to run the deep go route on the sideline, and then you get the switch release inside from the tight split receiver, and Tucker Kraft is going to go up the seam. Now, what I said earlier about Joe Witt and kind of defending him a little bit, what you'll see here is that the Commanders run a different coverage on this, and in theory, it should cover it pretty well, but they have another individual error, which causes it to mess up. So we'll play this through, and I'll get to where I think the issue and the fault is.
This one we'll probably be in agreement on.
So I've marked it up here. So to me, this looks like it's a Tampa 2 coverage rather than cover 3 or sort of any sort of man matching that we just saw. So you've got 2 deep safeties over the top. You've got Bobby Wagner as the Mike running the middle hole. And then you've got 4 underneath the zones. And you've got 2 flat defenders. The 2 outside corners are flat defenders. And you've got 2 seam hook defenders. And one of them is Frankie Louvu. And the other one is Mike Sanderstill. And for me, Mike Sanders still gets really nosy on this flat route, and he should be playing his hole here, where you can see Luvu is kind of around about that level. That's about where Sanders still should be. He's responsible for the seam hook, so this is obviously a seam route. He should be running deep with that and covering that, and not worrying about the running back in the flat. The flat responsibility is Trey Amos on the outside, and in a Tampa 2 or in any sort of zone coverage, you want to take away anything deep, force the check down here, and then you have multiple defenders rallying to the ball to make the tackle. And the extra thing to add here is this was 1st and 25, so there is absolutely no reason to be getting super nosy on this flat route.
That was the frustrating part. Is you need to take away the deep threats first, and Washington likes to do this as well with their cover 2. They don't really typically play cover 2 out of like too high. I might be mistaken there, but they do like to rotate their safeties into cover 2. They like to invert it as well, which puts defenders in positions that they're not typically in. So there's not a lot of coverages and scenarios where Mikey Sanders still is going to be a hook curl defender. He will play in the slot sometimes, so sometimes that he will be that position. But again, it's not something that he always does. And so again, it's just tougher. But this one's frustrating because 1st and 25, you don't need to bite on that. And you have, again, this is the good answer to this play, because if he's in the position that he's supposed to be in, it's a quick little check down to the halfback, and you rally and make the tackle, which tackling was also hard. So maybe that wasn't a guarantee.
So from what I gather, is an intentional soft coverage in the 1st and 25 to kind of drop it to promote the check down and tackle for a 5-yard game, but Mikey Sanders still bit there. I see that.
Yeah, the defensive coordinator technically should have won on that rep. Like LaFleur thought that they were going to play single high, get the cover 3 beater like they had the last time, but they rotate to cover 2, and you should have it drawn up. So sometimes it's not always on the defensive coordinator. He cannot run on the field for them.
And that was why I wanted to defend Joe Witt a little bit. I'm willing to go in on the coordinator. I think Cliff Kingsbury, as we're about to see, struggled a little bit. But for Joe Witt's perspective, yes, obviously they could have done better defensively, but I think it was more down to individual errors. Like in the run game, they actually held up pretty well. They got hit by a few jet sweeps or end around kind of things, like trick plays, but in general, Josh Jacobs only averaged 3.7 yards per carry, and that was boosted by a 10-yard run right at the end of the game on 3rd and 22 when Washington was playing coverage. So I think generally speaking, they kept a good lid on the run game, which is encouraging because the Packers are a good run team, but they had individual errors, and that will come sometimes with playing man coverage and the way they want to play it. But there was things like Will Harris had a really tough game, as we saw against Tucker Kraft, and then they had those errors with the seam balls to Kraft, and there's not really a huge amount that you can do as a coordinator when players are making individual errors. You can bench someone, but it doesn't mean the next guy coming in is not going to make more errors. So
and as we saw in the preseason, the depth is not really great on this team.
Exactly.
So you can't really just go start benching people, and you just kind of have to trust they're going to make the right play.
And hopefully this is a good teach tape, because we have 10 days of rest. We also have Brock Bowers, one of the premier tight ends in the league, coming into Washington this week. So it's going to be interesting how that plays out.
Yeah, exactly. And what I would say before people start killing Will Harris is for me, he was one of their best players in week 1.
He was.
And I didn't necessarily anticipate that. When I studied him in the offseason when they signed him, I thought he's a good-ish player. I think overall Jeremy Chin was a better player, but I thought for what they want a tight end a strong safety to be able to do, and they want to be able to play more man coverage, I thought Will Harris has more coverage upside. He has a history of comes as a corner and has transitioned to safety, so he has coverage skills, and so I thought he'd be someone that they could match up and do some different coverage things more than they could with Jeremy Chin. And you saw that in week 1 against the Giants, and he was really, really good in that game. Unfortunately, on a short week against the Packers, he really struggled. But hopefully he'll bounce back, and then they will need him to against, as you say, Brock Bowers this week.
Yeah, hopefully Washington doesn't play on Thursday night anymore. Just nothing good ever comes from Thursday.
I agree. Those games start at 2 a.m. for me. Screw that. Right. So should we move to the offense? We're done talking about the defense. Right. So offense. Yeah. Not great. is a good summary. We can cut that there.
This kind of goes back to the short week stuff as well. Like
yes,
last year when they played the Eagles on Thursday night, it wasn't great either. And I don't know, that could be Cliff's kryptonite, is a short week.
A short week against a very, very good defense.
Yeah.
It is a pretty good kryptonite for most people, I think.
Micah Parsons, basically.
Yeah, that really helps. Right, so what we'll say about the Packers is they are a very good defense, and they have some really, really well-disguised coverages. They played a lot of zone. They play zone generally anyway, or they did week 1. But they played it even more this week. And there is a theory behind, playing zone against a team like Washington and Jaden Daniels, and we'll get to that. But what they do, so the Eagles last year, when they beat Washington, they played a lot of zone, they played a lot of quarters, but Vic Fangio is well known for playing zone and lots of quarters and kind of showing the same look and just running different quarters out of those looks. Whereas what the Packers did differently, so it's not the same template for people getting into that kind of argument. What the Packers did differently was they disguised their coverages really well. And these first 2 clips are going to be examples of that. They show, this was the opening third down of the game. So it's 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, something like that. Mm-hmm. They've got just about everyone on the line of scrimmage here threatening to blitz. So that makes things difficult. Obviously, up front for the offensive line, you've got to figure out which guys are coming, which guys are not. From the coverage perspective, you've also got to figure out which guys are going to drop into coverage and which guys aren't going to drop into coverage, which also makes things difficult. Now, what the Packers do here really nicely is they run what's known as inverted Tampa 2. And Washington did this a fair bit last year as well. So what they do, normally in Tampa 2, you have a safety, 2 safeties over the top. You have one safety will rotate back, and this safety that's in the box would rotate and play this deep half. And then you'd have the Mike linebacker run and play this middle hook, and then you'd have 4 underneath defenders. They get to it differently. The outside corners are the guys that drop back into the deep halves, and the safety in the middle of the field steps up and plays the middle hole. So what that allows you to do as a defense is it allows you to give a single high coverage look pre-snap and get to a 2 high coverage look post-snap. So that's a quite a nice disguise thing. It also means you can get the safety down in the box if it's a run play, which is why a lot of defensive coordinators like this kind of thing. But yeah, we'll run this through and you'll see Washington thinks they're getting quarters coverage based on the concept they have called. They obviously know the Packers like to play quarters coverage and they like to change their rotation. So I don't think they get caught out here by the fact that they play single high and they rotate to 2 high. I think what they get caught out here by is they were expecting quarters coverage because that's what the Packers tend to do. And they got inverted Tampa 2. So we'll run this through and you'll see what they're trying to do here, Washington, is they're expecting quarters coverage and they're expecting this safety to be the backside quarter safety, and they want to put him in a bind. So they've got Zach Ertz running a deep sit route, and you've got Terry McLaurin running over the top of that. And typically, if you get quarters coverage, this safety will then either have to run down and sit on Zach Ertz's route, leaving Terry McLaurin to run over the top of him, or he'll have to sit back deep, take on Terry McLaurin, and leave Zach Ertz wide open over the middle. But because it's Tampa 2, this safety just goes and sits on Zach Ertz's route, and then you've got 2 corners that are over the top of Terry McLaurin, and neither of them are open. Now, because of this change in coverage, Jaden Daniels was obviously expecting quarters because what concept they had called, and then they get Tampa 2. Jaden has to hold onto the ball for a little bit extra, and when you have a pass rush like the Packers have, supercharged by this man inside Micah Parsons, suddenly that turns into a bad option, having to hold on to the ball. You're trying to figure out where you're going to go with the ball. And I'll give credit to Jaden Daniels here. He does a really nice job avoiding getting sacked and throwing a check down here to Austin Eckler and getting that ball out and giving them a chance to do something. But it was a nice look from the Packers, a nice switch things up. And it worked so nicely for them that on the second drive, when they got to 3rd and 7, the Packers ran it again. And it's the exact same thing. Again, those 2 outside corners are playing the deep halves. The deep safety, they're showing a single high safety pre-snap. He's going to play that hole again. And this time, I think the Commanders are running 2 deep crossers from either side of the field. So you've got a deep crosser from this side, a deep crosser from this side. And essentially, in quarters coverage, that can be really tough when you get 2 safeties in the middle trying to figure out, do we pass this off or do we pick them up man-to-man and be out-leveraged? But because you have this Tampa 2 coverage where you have a whole player in the middle, he just sits in the hole and covers both routes at the same time, and it gives Jaden nowhere to go with the ball. So again, we'll run this through and you'll see these 2 deep overs are going to run right into this whole player that's basically covering both of them. And then you've got a bigger problem inside, which is Micah Parsons is coming through. We'll see more of that later on. And Jaden Daniels, again, has to force a quick check down. And Eckler does a nice job getting it close to being a first down, but they don't get it.
Let me jump in here real quick, Mark, if you don't mind. First of all, I want to miss Austin Eckler. I feel like he was a good check down option for Jaden Daniels. Definitely a safety blanket. We talked about him last year, and pass protection, he's excellent in regard to that. So big loss for us there. There was a stat going around. I heard Ben Sting reference it about only 4 of Jaden Daniels' touchdown passes have been against zone throughout his career. It's funny how dirty stats pop up when bad things happen, right? He had a bad week and now he can't read zone. I'm just curious with that. Do you think is there credibility to that theory by any chance? Was there just a lot of generated pressure with the Green Bay defensive front on Washington? What would you attest more of the problems for this last week?
Jaden Daniels can read zone. He's fine.
Okay.
I'll say that right now.
Okay.
I put together, I think during the offseason, just a highlight of all of his middle of the field throws. I'm pretty sure all of them were against zone.
Okay.
I was nervous about him not being able to do that coming out of college. And
Yeah,
he shut me up really, really quickly and proved that he can do it. So yeah, that's dumb.
Okay. Okay.
Playing against zone isn't the issue for him. The issue is the combination of zone and being able to rush 4 and get a ton of pressure because you've got Michael Parsons, who's one of the best 2 pass rushers in the league. And that is the issue. And the Eagles present that same issue because they've got Jalen Carter and a bunch of really good pass rushers on their front 4.
So yes, the blueprint is out on Jaden. You just have to have an elite front 4 with an elite pass rusher, and you have to have an elite secondary as well.
Oh, yeah. I understand. It's understandable. Makes sense.
Yeah. If every team in the league has that, then Jaden Daniels is solved. But I think a lot of quarterbacks would also be solved. Absolutely.
Then on top of that, I mean, for me, the story of the game, you guys know the game at a much higher level than I do, but from what I was observing and from what I've read, 46% of Jaden's dropbacks were where he had some pressure in his face. He was constantly pressured throughout the game, so it accelerated his clock, in my opinion. So that's kind of what I thought there.
I would agree with that. Where was I with this piece? Disguised zone coverages.
Sorry.
So this is
one thing I can kind of touch on before you get kind of further into this, going off of what I talked about, short week, how you can kind of quickly prep and look at what teams did the week before. It's different because it's the Lions and it's different teams and whatnot. But like Mark said, they played a lot of too high, and when they didn't play too high, they played a lot of cover 3. So what Cliff was expecting on those 2 plays, again, is you're going to play – they show that single high, so he's expecting cover 3, possibly quarters. But they also did play a lot of cover 2 against the Lions. So that's another area where I was kind of like, you should sort of be expecting these kind of looks. I didn't watch too much of the Lions game, but that's just kind of one – and it kind of goes back to that pressure thing. Even when they didn't get pressure, it's just like the Packers had the perfect call. Like that previous play, they didn't really get pressure there until way late, but that's because of the coverage. So it was just kind of a mix of both. And you have those games sometimes where, sometimes you just get beat by a good call.
Yep. The other team makes money too. So yeah. And that's something that the Packers are really good at disguising their coverages and changing things up and making the quarterback hold onto the ball, which is a really bad combination when you have Mike Parsons now. I know we're emphasizing the Mike Parsons thing. We'll get to why that's such a big thing. So this was a 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5, and they've got everyone up on the line of scrimmage, and you're thinking, and so now the potential blitz. And when you think about a blitz, you associate it with man coverage. So what do Washington run? They run a mesh concept with a dagger concept behind it, but it's mainly this mesh concept. And what happens is the Packers actually drop out into cover 3. And when you drop out into cover 3 against mesh, suddenly you have 4 underneath defenders ready to cover those 2 underneath crossing routes, and they're almost instantly dead. So that means Jaden Daniels has to, again, hold on to the ball and not go either way. And maybe you say here, get this out really quick to one of these underneath guys. You've got multiple defenders here, all eyes on it, ready to drive an attack on this. Yes, maybe they complete this and get a first down, but when you're teaching quarterbacks, you see a zone coverage and you're running a mesh concept, you are not throwing these crossing routes because you know that you're just going to get your receivers lit up by a defender driving down on them. So he can't go there. Instead, he has to think about going to one of these dagger concepts. Now, this is a play where Jaden Daniels himself, I think, would admit that he didn't do the best job here. He gets kind of spooked by Parsons diving inside Tunsil. I don't think he expects Tunsil to recover as well as he did.
He's not used to that.
No.
He's not used to that recovery. It's an incredible recovery.
It was. I don't remember if I included the end zone angle on this, so I'm going to just point out now that this was a great recovery by Tunsil.
That is not a pressure. We need to emphasize that is not a pressure. That is a good offensive play.
And so that was there was enough protection here for Jaden Daniels to not have to feel like he had to scramble. But because he wasn't necessarily used to Tunsil being able to make that kind of recovery, he feels that pressure and immediately starts rolling out to his left. And when he starts rolling out to his left, he realizes, actually, I'm in trouble here. There's not really much over here for me to go to. Most of my options are over on this side. And then he makes probably one of the worst decisions I've ever seen him make, which is, I'm going to throw this wheel out to Austin Eckler for some reason. I don't know why. Like, if he's going to try to rip this dagger out.
The dagger, you can maybe even argue that he could rip to Debo.
Yeah.
Can't see the end zone, but anything is better than the shortest man on the field taking a fade ball.
Yeah, and against the guy that has the leverage. Like, it's not like Eckler's got by him.
You can even argue he could rip one of the two underneath routes and try to fit that in there kind of low. It's just
do anything but the route that he tried to throw. He nearly gets intercepted. So that was one where Jaden, I didn't have the end zone angle, so sorry, Tunsil. But it was a great recovery from him. But yeah, so that was to show what the Packers' game plan was going in. They were going to disguise their coverages. They were going to switch up and play. They were going to play a bunch of zone, but they were going to switch up what they played, and they were going to do a really nice job of hiding.
They did a really good job. Like, again, I go back to tendencies and what they do, and if you look at last year and then in week 1 on 3rd and short, which in that scenario, the Packers ran 40% man coverage. They don't run a lot of man coverage, so that's telling you when they run man coverage, it's on this exact situation. So I'm not upset with the mesh concept. We'll get to, hopefully Mark has it, the last 4th down of the game to Jalen Lane. That was a bit frustrating.
I don't have that one in this.
All right, well, I tweeted about my disgust with that one. So we can...
I saw the tweet, actually, but go ahead.
Yeah. So, and I thought I would demonstrate why zone works against a lot of the stuff that Washington likes to do. So this is, and why the Eagles and the Packers had success doing this zone thing. That gives some credibility to the people saying they've been figured out by zone coverage, but we'll get to that. So you've got a cover 6-ish concept here where you've got a deep safety. You're playing single high, but he's actually rotating to a quarter. You've got an outside corner sinking back to play a quarter. And a cover 6 is quarter half for people that don't realize. So essentially on this half of the field, you're playing quarters coverage. On this half of the field, you're playing cover 2. So quarters coverage is known as cover 4. Cover 2 is cover 2. You add the 2 and the 4, you get cover 6, right? But what playing this kind of coverage does is it gives you 4 defenders over the 3 receivers. And that's what a lot of zone coverages are all about, is getting an extra defender over the number of receivers. So on this side of the field, you'll have 3 guys over the running back and the receiver on this side, or if it's just the receiver, you'll have 2 over 1, 4 over 3 sort of thing. So what that means is when Washington runs this little tunnel screen to Deebo Samuel, you have Zach Ertz and Noah Brown trying to block. But even if they block both guys, which they don't, then you've still got 2 guys coming in deep to rally to the ball that are spared to tackle Deebo. So it's kind of busted from the start. I've got a cat coming in to say hello. It's kind of busted from the start.
Show here every week.
But you can see that they're rallying to the ball. I think, I did. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 over the top of 1, 2, 3, and then Deebo's just got nowhere to go. Both Ertz and Noah Brown kind of leave this block to each other. This cat really wants to say hello. There we go. And yeah, it's busted. Deebo's got nowhere to go, and they get tackled pretty quickly for no gain. They even tried to do the little fake screen thing that they do, where they fake the swing screen. They've got Deebo in the backfield. They've got it all dressed up as disguise. He motions out to the flat. They fake the swing screen, and then they get Noah Brown running the deep over route. Sorry, not the deep over route. You've got Terry McLaurin in the deep over or the post, and you've got Noah Brown faking the screen block and then working out to the flat or down the sideline on that fake screen. But because the Packers are playing zone coverage, they're not biting on any of it. They're just playing their zones and their responsibilities. and you get everything matched up. You got a safety over the top of Terry, you got a corner over the top of Noah Brown, you got the slot on the inside defender on top of Debo. All of that's dead, and then Jaden's got nowhere to go with the ball, and he has to try to run around and make things happen, which, you know, he does a pretty good job of there, but not ideal, obviously. And then the other part of why people think you play a bunch of zone against Jaden Daniels is you get extra eyes on him, so when he starts to scramble, they are ready to rally to the ball. And there is definitely some credibility to that. And you'll see this here. This isn't necessarily a full zone play, but what you see is when you get to the top of the drop here, Jaden Daniels starts feeling some pressure from inside, and you've got two defenders that are just sat there watching him, ready to run wherever he goes. Now, I think he should be on time throwing this to Noah Brown, and he'd have a completion, but that's another topic. This is pointing out that when you get guys that are watching him and ready to react to him rolling out, you can see he starts to roll out, then suddenly you've got multiple defenders in his path. He's got nowhere to go, and he tries to circle back to the other side. And you got Michael Parsons and some other big guys up front that eventually chase him down. So it makes it tougher to scramble. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm just quick questions, being inquisitive. So obviously the last couple of plays have been defensive wins, right? What would you attest to the wins? Would it be that was it poor play call? Was it lack of creativity? Was it not throwing on time? What would be the biggest consequence there in your opinion?
No, I think for the Packers, they did a really nice job and to an extent you can say there is a template you want to play more zone because you want to keep as those things that I just showed you. You can keep eyes on Jaden Daniels to try to stop him scrambling. That's obviously a huge threat in this offense. You can take away some of the things that they do on the perimeter with those bubble screens and those RPOs type things, and that is a big part of this offense as well. What I would say is that those were cold screens rather than RPOs, and if you see multiple defenders over the top of those, you should have better looks to run the ball inside. And that was my biggest criticism of Cliff in this game, was he just did not want to run the ball. And
that's what I was going to say is, like, you can talk about like the concepts and stuff. Like, again, sometimes you're just going to get beat by a better defensive call, but the fact that they didn't run the ball as much as they did, because they were having some success with it early, like first down runs, I think they were getting 4 to 5 yards, and that's a good run. And they just, for whatever reason, abandoned it. It just didn't make a lot of sense, especially if you're going to play a team that's going to play a lot of too high, which the Packers did. Run the ball, like force them out of the too high, and they just didn't. That part was the very frustrating part. And I think Cliff he loves throwing the ball on 3rd and short, 4th and short, just loves it. And sometimes your answer to that has to just be run straight, just run straight. And again, that kind of comes down to philosophies of offense and stuff like that. But I think that running the ball is something they should have done a lot more of on Thursday night.
Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. I 100% agree with that point. To emphasize it, I went back and looked at the number of running plays they had called or they ran in the first half before the 2-minute drill. I'll take out the 2-minute drill because obviously in a 2-minute drill you're passing the ball more often. But I think they had 4 drives. They ran 20 plays, and I think they ran the ball 4 times out of those 20 plays. So less than a quarter of the time they were running the ball. And those runs, the first one was a read option play where Jaden Daniels read it wrong and got the running back tackled for a loss. The next 3 went for 4 yards, 5 yards, and 4 yards. So those 3 all were pretty good hits and set them up for big good situations. But like Nick said, when they actually ran the ball, they did a pretty good job of it. But they just, I have no idea why they didn't run it more.
They ran it 2 times. 2 times on the set, none on the first drive. 2 times on the second drive. 3rd drive didn't run at all. 4th drive finally started to run, like Mark said, 5 yards. And they just stopped running it. Yeah, maybe 5 total times in the first half.
Wow,
which it's just not. You're not going to really win games like that. And if you're getting 3 to 5 yards on runs, that's a good run.
And that puts a lot of pressure on the offensive line to handle the pass rush that the Packers already has. And then when you add in the guy that we keep talking about, Michael Parsons here, it makes it really, really tough if you're not running the ball and you're dropping back to pass as often as they were.
They traded away the world's greatest run defender, Kenny Clark, according to Jerry Jones. So you got to run the ball.
Exactly. And so, Parsons and their pressure package up front did play a really big part in why the Packers had such a good success in this game. But I thought I would just highlight like just how good Parsons was and why that pressure package was really tough for the offensive line to deal with. And again, part of the point is Washington needed to run the ball more and take pressure off their offensive line, let them come forward and run at these guys rather than just having to let these guys pin their ears back. But this was, I think, that first inverted Tampa 2 play, that first third down of the game. Parsons is here lined up inside against the left guard, Brandon Coleman. Coleman has really struggled, by the way, but we'll get into that. Coleman whiffs on him real quickly, and Parsons quickly turns it into a one-on-one with Tyler Biadasz. Now, Biadasz does a nice job picking this up, but Biadasz is always, like most centers are always going to lose fairly quickly to Parsons. Biadasz delays this as well as he can and stays in front as long as he can. And this is a pretty good job by him. But eventually Parsons is able to spin back inside and create that pressure. The rest of the guys are getting some pressure around him. And Daniels, as I said, did a nice job of turning back and finding a check down.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this was the second inverted Tampa 2 play where we see up front that this time there is still the same four that are rushing, but Parsons and the defensive tackle are going to run a stunt. So this time Parsons is going to get matched up against Nick Allegretti. And they did a really nice job of this game of getting Parsons matched up on the guys they wanted to get him matched up on. And so you run this stunt. You get both Tyler Biadasz and Brandon Coleman end up having to pick up this stunting defensive tackle, which puts Allegretti one-on-one against Parsons, and that's going to go about as well as you would expect it to go. Like Allegretti has played not bad, I don't think, to start this year, but that's not a matchup you want him on. And Parsons gets through, and again, Jaden Daniels does well to find a quick check down. Maybe a little bit unlucky not to get a bit of a roughing penalty. Parsons came in pretty hard when the ball was already on, but I'm not going to complain about the refs when they got
they attacked the right side. Like I think Allegretti was really good. I think the first week. This week, again, you're putting him in a position where Micah Parsons, you're going one-on-one. That's not what you want. Like that's why you have Sam Cosmi. Like if Sam Cosmi's in that position, you would expect him to win a couple of those reps. But it was tough for Allegretti. It was tough for Connolly. It was tough for Coleman. I thought Laramie Tunsil's always going to be very good. So it's just a nightmare matchup. And when you don't run the ball, this is what you get. Like this is what's going to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's the thing of it is not running the ball sets them up so that you get into third and long situations, and then suddenly the Packers can start being a little bit more aggressive, and they don't have to play zone. They can play a little bit more man. They can blitz extra guys, and then suddenly you're getting 5-man pressures where you're guaranteeing Parsons a one-on-one against your rookie right tackle. And even if he doesn't get there, you get this nice little stunt inside where you're getting Coleman struggling to pick up he has had a really rough start to the season, and he's struggling to pick up the stunting linebacker. And so we'll run this through. You get this nice interior stunt, but what this interior stunt does is it guarantees that Connolly's getting no help. And so these guys are all occupied by this interior stunt, and they don't necessarily pick it up as well as you'd like anyway. But the problem is that Connolly is left one-on-one against Parsons when ideally you'd have chip help or a line slide to help him out, or both. And
which way they slide it? I missed the start. Did they not slide at all?
They did slide, but it's actually I think they slid away from him. I can't remember. Let's see. Which way?
No, it's kind of 5-0.
It's kind of just 5-0. Yeah, it's not a slide. So in an ideal world, you're sliding the protection, but when you've got five guys up on the line of scrimmage in a third and long situation, it's very hard to be.
I was trying to save him a little bit, seeing if like maybe they slid to him and he's okay with losing inside like that, but they didn't. So it's
funny how devastating one player is. And Nick, just curious, I don't have the numbers right in front of you right now. Who was our highest and lowest graded offensive lineman in the last week? I mean, obviously Connolly got a lot of criticism, but he's a rookie. It's Micah Parsons.
It was Chris Paul with 11 snaps, so that doesn't really count.
Okay.
But Laramie Tunsil was the highest, and then Connolly was lowest.
What were the numbers?
Tunsil 65.7 overall, 81.2 pass block. Connerly 37.6 overall, 20.8 pass block.
Wow. What about Coleman?
Coleman 63.4 overall, 49.1 pass block.
Interesting. Okay.
Run block we graded him pretty high. I got to relook at that. So relook.
Okay. Thank you.
And then just one final point I thought I'd look at is when as we've talked about, when the game plan is such that you're passing the ball a bunch and you're not getting anywhere and you're setting up third and long.
Oh yeah, this one was frustrating too.
Then you let the Packers kind of tee off on you, and they can blitz and they can rush 5. And what that means is that these outside corners, they don't have to care at all about any sort of shot down the field, because they know this pass rush is going to get home, especially when you've got Parsons on the edge and you've got an extra blitzer. You're getting 5 rushers. You're going to get pressure when you've got Micah Parsons and 4 other guys, right? So this corner has absolutely no care in the world about any sort of double move. He is just sitting on this route the entire time. You will watch him. He will hardly move. He'll take a few steps back.
Yeah, watch the left and the right cornerback for comparison's sake here.
Yeah, and so normally you'd see a corner drop back and give himself a little bit of a cushion and then charge up when the receiver breaks. And this is something that Washington does a lot of, is in these kind of short yard, sort of 5-yard ranges. They try to run these hitch routes where they get the corners pedaling backwards and they break it off nicely at the right time, and Jaden delivers it at the right time, and they maximize the kind of separation and they complete it and move the chains.
Yeah, Noah Brown kind of lived on this sort of like situation last year.
Yeah. And so, but when you've got this pass rush teeing off the way it was, these corners don't have to care at all about anything like that. They can just sit on the route. So we'll run this through and you'll see the corner does not, he just sits there. He's not backpedaling. He's not worried at all. Like
he started at the 26, I think. And then,
yeah, he's moved 2 yards. The other corner has dropped back a little bit more, but still not a huge amount. Normally he would be dropping back like 3 or 4 more yards, trying to make sure that he's staying on top, keeping that cushion between himself and the receiver, ready to break on it. But at this point, he's sitting there going, I don't care. The pass rush is going to get home. You're not going to beat me deep. It doesn't matter. So he just sits on it. And that means he's in a perfect, as soon as Noah Brown makes any kind of break, he's driving on it. So even if it had been a double move, he was going to drive on it. Whatever sort of hesitation there was from Brown, he was driving on it. And he was just sitting on that, knowing that this pass rush was going to get there. And he's right. The pass rush is going to get there. But he's able to break it up as a result. And it was dangerous because it could lead to interceptions. But you can see what they do. You get Micah Parsons isn't even on the field at this point. You've got the front 4 plus a blitzing linebacker. And when this running back steps up to pick the blitzing linebacker, the other linebacker is going to do what's called green dog, which is he was meant to be covering this running back man-to-man. When that running back stays in to protect, he joins the rush. He gets a green light to join the rush. And you can see, obviously, the blitzing linebacker jumps over Eckler and is, pressuring Jaden Daniels. They're getting some pressure elsewhere. And there's not a lot going on for this offensive line here trying to block this. And Jaden Daniels has no option but to try to throw that quick hitch to Noah Brown. But this corner was just sat on it the whole time because he knows that pressure is going to get there, breaks up the pass, and they're fortunate that it was only a pass breakup and not an interception, because it could easily have been that.
There certainly was blood in the water there.
That's kind of the frustrating thing that you kind of have to live with this Cliff offense is, ideally you would rather have Terry McLaurin run that sort of route. But again, we saw it last year that sort of stuff worked because of the tempo, and it got teams kind of on the back foot a little bit. And it is the frustrating part, but you kind of have to live and die with that sort of thing because he's just not going to move him in that situation.
So that's a really good point. I'd like to pick up on that. This is something that, as Nick said, when you have the tempo of the offense, you do this kind of thing where we talked about this last year. They had their outside receivers stay on their side. So McLaurin stayed as the left outside receiver. Noah Brown, for the most part, stayed as the outside right receiver. And then based on which hash mark they're on, they become either the X or the Z receiver. So on this time, they're on the right hash mark, which makes Noah Brown the X receiver and Terry McLaurin the Z receiver. Ideally, in this situation, you'd have Terry McLaurin be the X receiver running this hitch route where he's able to body off the defender and be the go-to guy in those kind of situations. But when you're running tempo, you don't have the time to. It kind of defeats the purpose of tempo if you're having Terry McLaurin line up on the left on one play and then sprint over to the right on the next play. You want to be able to get lined up on the ball, be ready to go straight away so that you're stopping the defense from being able to call different complex coverages and figure out what you're trying to do. They have to go more basic because they just don't have the time to do anything. But in this game, they weren't using tempo as much as they should have, and that was another big criticism. Like the tempo thing is a huge philosophical thing for Cliff, and that's why he always does these outside receivers stay on their same side, and he can justify it because we're using tempo and we're getting the benefit of the tempo. But when they don't go up tempo and they don't get the benefit of the tempo, then you've got to move Terry McLaurin around.
That's why I was super frustrated with that not the last fourth down, but that essentially ended the game. They're down by 14, 4th and 4 at their own 41 or whatever. Because you can kind of see in this play, again, they're not really respecting the deep shot, but you can see how the difference between the left cornerback and the right cornerback played, because left cornerback does not have any worry that Noah Brown's going to beat him deep. Like, yeah, he's going to bite on jump on that, but he doesn't really, no offense to Noah Brown, but he doesn't really respect Noah Brown to beat him deep. Whereas Terry McLaurin, we've seen it time and time again that he will beat someone deep. So that's still relatively a small cushion for how far off he played. But that's kind of the problem with this kind of philosophy. And sorry, I don't know if you can hear my dogs going crazy, but the last fourth down is, like Mark said, they're going fast. It's no huddle, but then they motion Debo across the field. And then now you have an isolated slant to Jalen Lane. And I think Jalen Lane can be a very good receiver, but with the game on the line, press man, you don't really want Jalen Lane in that situation.
Yeah. So those, I think the Packers came in with a really good game plan, and they, as we talked about, played a bunch of zone. They disguised their zone coverages really well, so that was tough to deal with, and makes you hold on to the ball for a little bit longer while you're diagnosing that. And when you combine that with the fact that they've got Micah Parsons up front, that's really tough, and it's really tough on everyone involved. But I think Cliff, if you're going to blame a coordinator in this game, Cliff is the guy to blame. And I say that as someone that has defended Cliff a lot. He didn't stick to his principles of using the tempo and get the benefit of the tempo, when that's something that would have been a really good way to negate that pass rush. If those guys are getting on the ball quick and lined up and snap, that pass rush is going to tire quickly. And he did not use the run game at all, which again would have really negated that pass rush somewhat.
And we kind of talked about with last week's episode how, okay, this is cool. He is using more motion and he's kind of going away from that no huddle, but he was using that motion for a reason. And you didn't really see that a lot in this game. Like I said, that last fourth down, you're moving Debo away from the field and to isolate a fourth round receiver. Like it's weird. I don't know why Terry wasn't on the field on that play, but ideally that's the scenario you want, where you're gonna motion him across. You have man coverage, and now you've got your best receiver that you just paid a lot of money to, isolated with the game technically on the line, and you just don't. And maybe that's because they ran no huddle on the previous 3 plays or whatever, and he was tired. But it's just tough. You kind of can't really. It's tough to kind of balance that line there.
Let me ask you questions really quickly, right? So obviously Terry McLaurin had a slower start to the season so far. Are you concerned? What's the rationale? What's happening behind that? Mark, I see adamant no. Why do you say that?
I mean, it happened at a time last year as well, right? They had a slow couple of spells where Terry didn't get the ball. Terry will get the ball. Terry will be fine. Part of that, I think, was Jaden. There was a couple of throws where Jaden could have gotten the ball in both games, and there was the double move against the Giants where he overthrew him. In this one, there was a deep comeback off of play action where I think Jaden was feeling a bit rushed and hurried to check down to Debo when he had the chance to hit Terry down the field.
Yeah, I think that was on they had one, again, where they ran that 4 verts from the tight end set that we talked about with the Packers. They ran that, and they had, I think, Terry on the back side of it where he was just kind of rushed. And that kind of, you see that tendency a little bit with Jaden when there is pressure and he's dealing with it a lot during the game. He will kind of rush his decisions, which is kind of, natural to expect.
Yeah. So, no, I'm not concerned at all. Terry will get his.
All right, last question because we're over time. I do want to hear from you guys real quick. Obviously, you're playing the Raiders. You're coming up a loss against the Packers. What is one look for this upcoming game that you hope to see change, or something that or tendency you want to see potentially broken for this week? Nick, we'll start off with you.
Run the damn ball.
Okay.
No, I mean, I don't want him to go full send on running the ball constantly, but you cannot start a game with, like, I think it was 5 straight passes, and it's just, you're just teeing yourself up for a tough position to be in. So whether it's Jaden or Mariota back there, run the ball and use them in the run game. I don't know if I think we've seen maybe one or two design quarterback, but I have not seen a lot of like read option that they did in the past, where I could be wrong there, but I just don't feel like we've seen it as much this year. So run the ball.
So Nick, you are definitely echoing and making a friend of our show, Chris Russell, very happy with where the damn ball right there. So thank you for saying.
Typically I'm on the other side.
This is odd for you. This is definitely odd for you.
We typically hate running backs around here.
Okay.
But no, there needs to be a balance, and there was no balance at all.
Got it. Mark, what are your thoughts? We'll close up on that.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree. I echo that. That was going to be mine is run the ball more and use that to set everything else up. And I think the thing we've seen, and that I praised Cliff for a lot last year, was that he broke some of those tendencies and he learned to develop an offense where he was using the run game to set up play action, running the same kind of looks to set up different play action passes and limit the amount of drop back passing that they did. And they did a little bit of that in the Giants game as well, where we talked about that Debo package where they were moving them all over the place and setting things up off of those different looks and motions. And in this game, they just kind of abandoned all of that idea. And it was weird. I guess the short week probably played in part of it, and the threat of the Packers played in part of it. But I would say get back to what they do well, which is run the ball, set things up, and then whoever's in at quarterback will have a much easier time because they've got a balanced offense to work with.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they had one of the coolest run packages in the entire NFL last year, and it just seems like we haven't really gotten back to that yet. So
yeah,
hopefully
with 10 days of game, Cliff Kingsbury can get back into his bag. The one interesting thing about the NFL, it moves, guys. Tomorrow's already Thursday. We're already back into week 3, and we have a game on Sunday, so it's definitely going to be interesting. That being said, thank you to all 784 people that just tuned in live to watch a show, gave us feedback on the comments. We definitely appreciate that. Definitely follow Nick Ackridge's work on Twitter, on X, at PFF Nick Ackridge with a K, no C. He provides content every single week, every single day. Also follow Mark Bullock at his Substack, Mark Bullock's Film Room. Definitely some great content there. I'm George Carmi at GCarmi21. See you guys next Wednesday, hopefully for another Washington win. Have a great night, guys. We're out.